look at the major project for LPHD 753. In this assignment, you're asked to develop a quantitative research proposal addressing leadership theories based on research questions of your choosing. We're looking for about 4,000 words, double-spaced, cover page, reference page, a title, and abstract APA format, the whole gamut. So this should be the basic paper that you will use in every single class when you do a research project or a research proposal. The outline for the research proposal should always look like this. This is the same outline that you will use with your dissertation too. The dissertation has 5 chapters. The research project has 5 sections, but it's all the same. So you want an introduction of what the problem or purpose is. You want the literature review, and this is where you go back to the library and you find similar studies that connect to your research. So you want the first study to be that pivotal moment where you say, oh, this is what I'm going to study. And then from there, you can find other studies that either somehow relate to your study. Perhaps they're, I'll show you in a minute, but if you're using servant leadership and personality traits, let's say, as we did with minor project 1, you could continue that with minor project 2 and looking at an instrument a little bit deeper. And then with this project, your major project, you're digging into other articles of what have other people done with servant leadership and personality traits. What control variables have they used? What were their findings? What type of research was it? What type of demographic or population sample did they use? And just include several of those research studies to show that, again, we're not just doing research for the sake of doing research, but we're extending that field of research or filling a gap. Within your literature review, you'll also include these items, your theoretical foundation of variables. So with servant leadership, you would obviously use servant leadership theory. You'd include your hypotheses, the significance of your study, and this is where we talk about if we're extending the field or we're answering a call from a specific scholar or we're filling a gap. We'll also include any terms that may need to be defined. Some research projects don't need this, so please don't feel like you have to define every single term in your study. But if there are some terms that you think, well, maybe my audience may or may not know this, then you can definitely list those terms there. The third section is your method section, and this is where you talk about who you're going to research, what population, what demographic of people will you research? Is it a specific company? Is it a specific industry? Is it a random sample? Is it a convenient sample? And how many people will you need? We'll also look at your instrumentation. So if you remember in minor project 1, I wanted you to use 2 surveys for each hypothesis. The same goes here. We need at least 2 surveys, so 2 instruments, and we'll talk through that. What are the names of the instrument? Who are the authors? How was it developed? It doesn't need to be in as much detail as the minor project 2, but it needs to talk about, is this a valid and reliable instrument? What was the Cronbach's alpha score with this instrument when it was developed, and maybe in a recent research project? We also want to include any data collection procedures. So this is where we're writing out our recipe of what you're going to do. Will it be in a SurveyMonkey or in Qualtrics? Will you use paper surveys? Will it be electronic? Will you send it out through email or social media or hand deliver it? Those are the questions that we need answered with the data collection procedures. And how long will it take? Will you expect to do this within a week, within a month? Is there a timeline? Now keep in mind with this major project, you're not actually doing the study. A lot of times though, students will take the study and do it later. So think about that. This is maybe one of those assignments that's gonna resurface itself later as you look at doing research. You also want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your chosen design. So with this, oftentimes we're talking about, well, I'm going to use this sample of the population, but that could be a strength and a weakness. Maybe future studies need to include a different sample of the population, or it's a field-based study, it's a one-time study instead of a longitudinal study, and that's a weakness. Maybe we want to look at in the future doing a longitudinal study. Although the field-based study could also be a strength because it gives you that snapshot in time. So you just kind of think outside the box with your strengths and weaknesses of the chosen design. This is also a good place that you can type in anything about a bias that you may have. Do you work for the company? Do you know the people that you're going to survey? Are you offering some incentive, financial incentive that may skew the results? Those types of things can be written out in that strengths and weakness section. The analysis and conclusion section are not part of the proposal. However, you can add those in just for the sake of having that there and just let us know that it's beyond the scope of a proposal, or you can completely leave it out and just focus on the first 3 sections. The way this works with any research project is you do the first 3 sections here. Once it's all finished and you're ready to submit it to the Human Subject Review Board for approval, then you give it to the HSRB, the Human Subject Review Board. If they approve it, then you can go ahead and do your analysis. Before that approval, though, we can't go out and do surveys on people. We need to wait until you get that approval. That's the same process for any research project and for your dissertation. Once you have that approval and you go out and you do your research, and then you can do all of the analysis and report your findings, that's when you can finish those last 2 sections, the analysis and conclusion. We call those chapter 4 and 5 of your dissertation. So to get started, we need to go to the Region Library and find an empirical article. Again, look for something that's fairly recent, that is giving you a specific agenda that you need to go do this research. And with that, you're either filling a gap or extending the field of research. If you remember in Minor Project 1, we looked this up and we found a servant leadership article that's fairly recent. This is in 2020, and it gave us something very specific to do. So it's about service leadership, work engagement, service performance. And if we look through the article for future research, we find this statement. It says, there is a scope for future research to investigate other motivational related mediators such as job meaningfulness. And we picked that up and we put that then into our research project. So we could say then in the major project that we're answering the call by these authors, Zing, Graham, Etrapaki, and Snape. I hope I pronounced those right. Of their 2020 article, we're answering their call to do this research on, they call it service leadership. I'm going to say it's servant leadership and job meaningfulness. With that, we're using these 2 instruments. If you recall from Minor Project 1, we're using the Psychological Meaningfulness Scale and the Servant Leadership Assessment Index. And we've already written out our research question and hypotheses in Minor Project 1. So this is how your assignments in this class can build upon one another. Now, once you get all of this together, then you want to go in and actually write your paper. Okay, so this is a paper on authentic leadership and complexity management. It's not the topics we just mentioned with the PowerPoint, but this just gives you an example of what it should look like. Remember, you need to have your independent variable and your dependent variable. So this is where you can right away see that we have 2 parts, the complexity management and the authentic leadership. Include your name and everything with your title page, your abstract. Don't forget that we're putting in your headings. If you remember, we've got heading 1. We have then heading 2 here where it's talking more about what this is. We have the literature review, the methods, the analysis, and the conclusion. And if we go back to that outline, this is actually your introduction, because every research project has the same type of structure. So this is our introduction. We have the literature review. And if you remember, it's specifically wanted you to talk about these areas: the statement of the problem, the statement of the purpose, the theoretical foundations, the hypotheses, the significance of the study, the definition of terms. With your method section, very specific: your population and sample, instrumentation, and data collection. And all of this is your major project. It's the same structure that you'll use with every single research project throughout our program. Whether it's a proposal or a full-blown project, you'll use the same outline with the 5 sections. And then when it's your dissertation, it's the 5 chapters. Don't forget that we're putting in the analysis, the weakness and strengths, and the conclusion. Now, if we go back, you'll see how this gets a little wonky at times. If we go back to our PowerPoint, you'll notice that it's actually asking you right here. This is the format you should follow. In your method section, you'll put strengths and weaknesses. And we don't have to include these 2 sections in your research proposal. You can write about it if you want to, just say that it's beyond the scope of this proposal, but you don't need a lot of information, a lot of text in those 2 sections. All right, so I hope that helps. And as always, feel free to use the draft option to send your draft early, and we can take a look at it and make sure you're on the right track.